Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Sweet Home, Season 1, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with Sang-wook's situation. The fact of the matter is we get a lot more clarity over the whole situation between him and Yeonjun. It turns out that... For one, I forgot to talk about before he got dragged away by that monster earlier in the last episode. When that room was kind of a little on fire because of Yuri and the omen that she's taking care of. But he was kind of reminiscing on something on the past and someone saying like, "Get out of here, Sang-wook, don't stay." Well, we finally get context for it because there was a lot of stuff last episode that I was conflating with the Yeonjun of it. I was saying Yeonjun is Yeonjae. I was conflating a lot of stuff between him and Sang-wook because they were kind of blurring together. So with that whole trial thing, I don't think that was the same person, but yeah, it definitely wasn't. But I was conflating it like it was, but it wasn't. No, that was something from 20 years prior connected to Sang-wook. The person who burned down his house for whatever reason, they were like, that's what was the thing that was kind of an accident. The person got 11 months and then 2 years probation. That was the situation. That's where Sang-wook's burns come from on his face and on his back and everything. It's from that fire. I'm assuming that was his dad that died in that fire. But I was equating that of like, oh, did... Yoon-jae pretend like, oh, I accidentally killed his... Like, I didn't know how that, like, played out. Like, I was like, I guess that makes sense. I guess, of like, if it's an accident, but it just seemed too light of a sin. But it's like, yeah, because I was conflating it with, like I said, Yeon-jae, but it's just like, he was looking at someone who got away with something terrible, and he was conflating it with something he dealt with all those years ago. He killed the guy that responsible because the guy was like, hey, I went to jail. You might want to leave me alone. I paid for my crimes. But it's like, no, you didn't really get to pay for them. You got off easy. And that was the first person Sang-wook ever killed, was someone that he got revenge on a person that ruined his life. And so all these years later, the father of that little girl we were seeing in those photos, her father hired him. So it was a thing of, yes, he's a gangster, he's hired to do this. Like, he does stuff from time to time. I guess it's like I'm kind of an equalizer of sorts. So just, I go on the more killing side of things. But what I mean by that, it's kind of like he does a vigilante justice. So I guess it's not just, I guess he has his own code of, yeah, I might be a gangster, but I do my own thing of, if it's for a cause I can get behind, then I'll do it. Or maybe that's just a bad reputation he's gotten. I don't know. But the guy pleaded with him. It's like, this guy took my daughter away from me. Like, he kidnapped her. And he won't, like, no one's going after him. So that's what this was all about. It was about finding her. And he was hoping to find her, but he never did. And what really pushed Sang-wook over the edge is because he had gotten the message from the guy. Because the guy's name is saved as 7,800 won. Because I guess it's like, that's how it's like, the guy's a nameless dude to me. All I need to know is like, he's the guy that, not unless that was just like, hey, this is like me sending you this money, but I think that's his contact info. And I guess it's like, right, rather than remember the guy's name, you just remember the amount of money he paid you and the job you're supposed to do. So because of that, and it is what I thought, especially with Jae-hyun, he ended up telling the others, and now they're conflicted because now Sang-wook is still here. Yuri is like patching him up. Granted, he does choke her and scares the crap out of her. So she's like, fine, finish patching yourself up. We do see her take an inhaler shot. So she does have some form of asthma. But yeah, the others are conflicting on whether they should let him stay or not. Because some of the group is like, yeah, he might have murdered a guy, but that guy was a murderer too. So if he didn't do that, one of us could have been his next victim. But it's like, yeah, but who's to say Sang-wook won't kill one of us? We can't let him stay here. But it's a thing of everyone's afraid of him. And he went, and even the mother, whose daughter he brought back in, it's like, here, this is all I own. You're going to have to take, because she promised she would pay him. And because she was bowing her head, the moment she looks up, he walks away. He didn't do it for the payment. And so he goes there, and he was digging a spot, and I was like, are you trying to dig your own grave? Like, what are you doing? And then he buries the keys. I was like, oh, trying to give a burial to that little girl. Because at this point, it's like you also don't even know if her dad's still around. But the message he had gotten from, because we had seen it previously, that on his phone he had gotten the message, like it was like 7,800 won. And like I said, at the time I thought it was supposed to be a payment. It's like, no, that's the guy's contact info. So he had gotten the message. Jae-hyun had read it and once again had spread it around to everyone else about what this was all about. And Jae-hyun came to him because it's like, I don't agree. I don't think what you did was right, but you did what you had to do. So, because I was about to say, as a religious person, how would that conflate with you? But it's also like, right, if you want, not everyone's going to be okay with it, but if you want to stay here, you can stay here. It doesn't align with his beliefs, but it's still, like I said, it's that very human thing of, that guy was a terrible human being. I don't agree with killing anyone regardless of it, but as a human being, I can understand it. I don't have to agree with it to understand it. So, and he'd even ask him, it's like, right, do you think anyone can pray? And Jae-hyun's like, yeah, anyone can. Not Jae-hyun, Jae-hyun. It's like, anyone can. And Sang-wook is like, can you pray? Because God definitely likes you more than he does me. But I love that conversation they have later on where Jae-hyun's like, at the end of the day, God doesn't like anyone more than anyone. And so, like, anyone can pray. And he talks a little bit about himself. He was an alcoholic, and basically religion is what ended up putting him on the right path. It ended up helping him in the long run deal with his demons. So, and all of Sang-wook, because Sang-wook even burned the money because he was like, yeah, I got paid for a specific job and I didn't do it, because the father was like, hey, I'm going to probably be joining my daughter soon, so if I know you probably haven't found her, but regardless of it, you can stop looking. He appreciates the fact is, it's like, you went this far for me where no one else would. So, like, either that's because he was in a process of turning into a monster at the time, or maybe he was sick and dying. Who knows? But he knew death was coming near him, and he's like, maybe I'll be reunited with my daughter. And because Sang-wook couldn't find her, it's like, my job was to find her, and I didn't. I got revenge. That's what pushed him over the edges, because he couldn't find her, and plus he got that message, so it made him go like, you know what? If I can't find her, I'm gonna leave, and there's nothing. She's not here. At the very least, I can kill you and make you suffer for what you've done. So it's kind of what he does best. So he is going to be sticking around, and he's kind of in charge of looking after. I think the store is going to be his duty now. It's like, since you're here, you're going to be part of like the roster of people that kind of have jobs, which I love. That obviously, like, there are partners. Like, no one goes anywhere alone. Everyone's kind of partnered up. And I love that the little boy is like, yo, my name's not up here. But the guy that Yuri is looking after is like, yeah, mine isn't either. I get it, because, like, he's a little older and he's on the sicker side, so they're not trying to put him on duty. But also the little boy, it's like, well, no, because for him, he doesn't quite understand it, because the mom is trying to teach him how to read currently, because he doesn't know how to read. She wants him to, rather than playing with toys, it's like, hey, educate yourself a little bit. It's like, sticking into that, like, mom side of things. She's like, yeah, kids that go to this very specific school, go to this particular region, like, they know how to speak Chinese, which I believe that's the same place her daughter went to school too, because the lady with the dog made a comment about, like, oh yeah, sent her daughter so far away to go to a really good school, and it's like, with everything going on, I bet you, sadly, she probably wishes her daughter went to a school a lot closer now. But my point was, like, the little boy probably doesn't recognize, like, what that list means, but he just feels like, hey, my name, I see my name, I'm able to read my name, and my name's not up there. And the guy's like, yeah, my name isn't up there. We'll be partners. Don't worry, kid. We'll be secret agents. And then he puts the shades on to be so cool, and the little kids look at him like, I don't get it. But the old man's trying to be so cool. I love that he's staring out there at his bike, and Yuri had to be like, yo, give me the key. And I love them fighting over it. He's like, no, let me keep it. She says, basically for her, it's like, I just want to make sure you don't do anything crazy trying to go out there to get your bike. And he's even saying, like, right, do we have any left? And she's like, we have enough. I don't know if it's his medicine, or maybe it's more specifically maybe about hers. I don't know if he knows that she has asthma or what. Because that conversation could have been about his medication, could be potentially about her with her asthma, or I don't know, but maybe, could that look on her face may kind of seem like they don't have a lot, but it's enough, and she probably doesn't want him to kind of stress about it. So, but I do love how the bike situation comes into play, because Yi Kyung ends up going to retrieve her phone, and we kind of get more context, because I was under the impression, I'm like, okay, so I thought her fiance was a government worker. Turns out he's not. He's a doctor. I was like, well, I was also like, well, in the end of the day, it kind of makes sense because I was about to say, if the government's involved, they would go to highly skilled doctors to help figure this out. Maybe potentially, but I don't know how. Like, he just seemed like a regular physician, so it's hard to say. Especially later on, because it seems like he worked in a prison. It seemed like he was a prison doctor specifically, but maybe that's like a very, because it was like I forgot what the word was. It's a very specific word that made me go like, oh, I think they used the word penitentiary clinic when Yi Kyung gets there later. So I'm like, was he was Songwon a prison doctor? Is that what that's supposed to imply? I was like, I didn't realize that place was. I mean, to be fair, when we saw his office, we only saw his office. But when you get the inside and you see that, I'm like, wait, he worked at a prison? Interesting. But either way, Eon Hyuk wants her to leave because she's preoccupied. It's like, right, someone with your skills, someone like you as a firefighter, we would need your help. But if you're not going to be here, if you're not going to have focus on that, you might as well leave. And for her, it's like, yeah, thanks for giving me permission to leave because there's something I need to look at, something I need to look into, because she is piecing it together that her fiance knew more than he let on, because we got a snippet of that scene, was it last episode? Now we're getting like the full context of the scene, and she's like, right, I got to find that tablet. It might still be in his desk. And she uses the old man's bike, which even at the end of the day, the guy was like, why are you peeping in here? Because it was Eon Hyuk that was looking out as she left, and he was like, yeah, I was paying bad debt. And I guess it's, well, I kind of owe you for you going to turn on the electricity and kind of putting your life in danger. So that was kind of shitty of me to do that without letting you know there was a monster there. But hey, at the end of the day, I do owe you. So he probably found out. He probably knew that the old man had the bike. So it's like, right, at least hook her up with some transportation to make it easier for her to go do what she's got to do. You've been kind of a key factor in all of this. I guess it arguably could also be about the fact is that if it wasn't for her, like, in the first episode pushing that monster back, maybe that's also where he feels like he owes her too. I mean, it could be compounded of like, yeah, the whole you being turning on electricity plus that situation, so I kind of owe you double. It could be either or both. But regardless, we do follow her circumstances to her going to where her fiance died, and we find out it was a fire in July, which I'm like, interesting. When we add in the fact is that he was the anonymous blog poster, meaning he was going through the transformation and he was studying himself. He's like, right, after like 15 days, it stabilizes. And he's like, this basically, if I study myself, we'll have a good enough understanding of this curse and this transformation. So, and if they can find a more stabilized subject like Hyun, who is more stabilized than anyone else we've come across, because he's held off this monsterization more than anyone else, because everyone else is already kind of morphed. Even, once again, the girl next door, granted we don't know how long at that point was she already suffering from the symptoms or not, but still, it's like he's still continuing to hold on. Because you had already noticed this when Yi Kyung was, like, the moment she was reading through the file and stuff, that you saw the camera was still on. It's like someone's watching you. And I guess government officials were like, because they were on her immediately. So I'm like, were they already generally in the area? Maybe they were looking for his files. Maybe they always have been. But just the fact that they happened to get her in that moment, like, they must have been watching their surveillance. Maybe they've been, like, low-key keeping this place staked out because they wanted to see if anyone would come looking for this information. So, because it's like, why else would you immediately be there? It's not like she was there that long, but maybe the argument could be it took her, like, she was there a little bit longer than you would expect, and it gave them time to track her down. I mean, we know what the government, well, the military saying, like, what they're doing, what, at least with the last broadcast, but we haven't caught up with them to see what they're actually actively doing. So, but they captured her trying to figure out what she knows, which she's like, I'm not stupid. I tell you what I know, you're going to kill me because I know too much. If I don't know anything, you'll kill me because I'm useless. It's like, right, you're looking for a subject who hasn't completely submitted to the monsterization, and she says she knows someone, that being Hugh. And so it was like, that's why what we got in the in media res opening of the first episode, now it makes sense why they're there. They're not there like, oh, they save people every day. They're there specifically for Hyun. Which now begs the question, is everyone else in the building dead? Because he was the only one that came out, but that might have been in the aftermath of everything, and it's just like, hey, I'm here. Like, they're here, either that he knows they're specifically there for him, or maybe he's getting pushed out by the others. Like, he kind of gave more into his monster side, and they're telling him to leave, and he just like, we don't have the context. We probably won't get that context until probably the very end of the season. Maybe not. She also, Yi Kyung's, circling back a little bit, also still isn't clear on what happened to her fiance. It's like, well, he might be dead, or it might as well be dead. We see that he was kind of being strapped down, and it seemed like, I guess, people were experimenting on him. I guess it got to the point that he no longer could rein it in, or so either he was testing himself and the government knew what was what, or they eventually found out and kept experimenting on him because he held out so long, which must mean that he eventually does turn into a monster, considering they're still looking for another monster. I mean, granted, the more subjects you have, the more you have more of a group to study to understand it. But for them to move on to it, trying to find another test subject, must mean he's not around anymore, or he went full monster, so there was no saving him. It might have been a thing, he was beyond the golden hour and ended up transforming. But we see that Hyun is not just getting essential stuff for the group, he's getting non-essential stuff, because he picked up one person, I think the character's name is like Ji Eun. I think he ended up picking up her diary or something like that. He was also gathering up batteries and just doing everything he needs to. And you have that sad moment where Dusik is the one that has to be outside the door to lock it. And he's just kind of, sitting there, and Hyun ends up unlocking it and handing the lock to him and going back inside of the prison. And just for him, it's like, right, what we're doing to him isn't fair, it isn't right. But from Hyun's perspective, it's like, at the end of the day, no, it isn't right, but he's dangerous and he has to be locked up. The fact of the matter is, we can still use him, and it just doesn't sit well with Dusik. And we know that he is or was a parent, so I think there's a little bit of that. If like, this youngster doesn't deserve this, the kid's done nothing but try to do good. I mean, he literally put himself in danger to rescue these kids. He came back up. I mean, granted, because you told him to, but to get me and the kids, like, the kid's done nothing but what everyone's asked of him. And he, like I said, we even see this point where, like, some of the other survivors hand him a note because they want specific things. So someone wants some very specific cream, get like someone's like phone charger. It's like stupid stuff they want him to get on his subsequent trips as well. So it's like, dude, come on. He ends up running into that fast creature from last episode too, and luckily got away from that scrape. I thought it was interesting because I was like, what is he doing with the yarn? But it was like he was setting up an alarm situation just in case, like, hey, I guess like this thing moves so fast that the phone would not pick up on it until the last second, so you need yourself a heads up warning device. I don't know if that was something he came up with or was it Hyuk who had suggested it, but yeah, he managed to come back from that whole excursion. But at the same time that all was going down, Sukhyun ends up giving in and becomes a monster, and it's up to his wife to put him down. For her, it's her telling her husband, hey, you have to pull yourself together. And it's like, yeah, it's going to be up to me to end up taking you down. And he says, please kill me. And then he says something we don't get to hear until later on. But he told her, I'm sorry. And for her, it's like, after 30 years, this is the first time you ever told me that. She's like, why is it that you waited until the very end to say that? It's like, it makes it that much harder. Because she thought it'd be easier. It's like, yeah, she was ready to do it last episode, but now it just makes it a little different, especially when it's like, when a time comes. It's like, you could have pulled the trigger last time, metaphorically speaking, because she was going to stab him or slit his throat, but now when the time comes, she didn't get the relief she thought she would. And the sad thing is, Yi Kyung isn't around for her to, like, because that was the person she probably would have leaned on the most. It's the person I think she got the closest to, and because even Yi Kyung thanked her for everything after she left, but she kind of had to go through that alone, which is sad. And she she's finally free of her husband, but it doesn't make that any easier, especially with him finally apologizing. Something she'd probably been looking for years, and it's just like, for you to finally say it now after all this time, it's just a lot. So you feel so bad for her having to put an end to him. But then also at the same time, you have Hyun walking in and seeing all that. It's like, right. And even the voices out of his head being like, yo, that's what they're going to do to you. You were warned by Suk Hyun telling you that you're just going to be used, and this is just further proof of like, yeah, the moment I give into my monster side, that is my future. But what I thought was so interesting is when you look at that scene, the first person to open the door was Eon Yo, and she actually for the first time has this like sullen look on her face, because she was just kind of a d-bag when they were running their trial run and Jisoo was playing the role of a monster, and it's like, oh, why do you try so hard? It's like, because I try hard at everything I do. But in pointing the bad at her, it's like, it's going to be your turn up next, and you're going to try even harder than I am, and I know you will. And it's just, I love that Jisoo's the one that kind of gets her to shut her mouth, because she acts like such a dick, except in this moment you saw like this sincere look on her face, like she actually felt bad for Hyun, because normally she'd kind of say like some off-colored remark, and now she was just quiet and she saw the sullen look on his face, and she has this very like sad look on her face. So later on, after hearing everyone whining and complaining and crying the moment the lights went out because they're running low on food, they're gonna run out of water too. So for her, it's just hearing all their whining and complaining, and especially after all Hyun does for you, he's like your monster mule that you get to get him to do stuff, and he's our sacrificial lamb, and all you guys are doing here is whining. It's like, well, to be fair, two of them are kids, but it's like also the adults are whining, complaining, thinking this is going to be over, and it's just because she herself isn't. I think she tries to she's putting up this tougher exterior, and it's like, right, there's times where you just have to cry, and then there's sometimes you just have to just stop it, like just kind of nut up or shut up type of thing. And I think for her, she's not letting that get the best of her, because the only time we've seen her cry was when she cut up that dress. I think she was allowed, like, this is it, this is the only moment you get, no more crying. She's going to be stone faced, she's going to overcompensate, try to pretend like everything's okay. But she actually spent time with Hyun because he was having a nightmare, because he still won't give into that voice. It's like, hey, all you have to do is tell me what you want, and you can just tell me what your desire is, and you can embrace it, become the monster. But he won't. Which is so interesting, because I think I talked about it at the time in the manhwa when he goes up against that eyeball thing. He's like, fine, you want to know my desire? I just want to live long enough to see that movie that he's supposed to see on the 25th. He hasn't really done that in this regard. That's why I'm like, because I haven't read enough, I don't know if that technically counted as him giving into his desire. Because like I said, at that point in the story, his nose bled, but at that point where I was in the story, he hadn't gotten to the monster stuff. He hadn't the monsterization hadn't kicked in yet. It probably would have, like, in the next chapter or two, because around that spot where his monsterization starts is where I left off in the webtoon. But yeah, Eon Yo was actually very compassionate towards him. Like, she still comes off very rude, but she's like, right, what happened to your arm? He's like, I did it to myself. She's like, no, I'm asking, like, who's to blame for it? He's like, it's me. And for her, it's like, all right, you need to stop, like, taking their shit. It's like, right, you're allowed to be pissed and throw a fucking fit. Like, when stuff hurts, obviously tell them, like, yo, I'm doing all this stuff for you and it hurts. It's like, don't just suffer in silence. Because it feels like she's not just talking to Hyun when she says that. It seems like she's speaking from experience, you know? And I wonder if that has to tie into her story and why she is the way she is. But even later on, when Hyuk and Jinsu come to visit him, she's just like, hey, just leave him alone. All you have him do is be your pack mule. And Jisoo is kind of telling her to shut up, because it's like, all you do is run your mouth. And her brother comes over and slaps the shit out of her, especially after she says, you're not even my real brother. So I'm like, did his dad marry her mom type of situation? Are they step siblings and not blood related in any way, shape, or form? Or I'm curious how that works. But it is a thing of like, yeah, she's always been running her mouth, but I think it speaks volumes that she's trying to stick up for him. It's like, hey, don't just treat him like that. Maybe she's used to being treated like that, the suffering and silence type of situation. But Jisoo was kind of like, she's not okay with it because like that's why Eon calls everyone such a hypocrite, especially Jisoo, because it's like, hey, you sit there, you pretend like you care about him, but at the end of the day, here you are willing to use him. It's just a front. But it's like, yeah, but what do? You sit here and run your mouth the entire time. Like, neither one of you really knows each other's circumstances. That's why you can be so callous towards each other. Once again, she's not doing much. Eon Yu is not doing much to help her case when she's just kind of like, what are you contributing? You're kind of a dick. That's not really helpful. But anyway, they want Jisoo to do his job. It's like, right, it's taking longer and longer for you to heal from your wounds. So that means that monsterization is starting to pick up and you are becoming more and more monster. So before you like give in, we need to make sure that we survive while you're still resisting long enough, because eventually you will go full monster. But and Hyun just kind of takes his like, sure, whatever, and goes does his job, and in the process gets strung up by the monster that's like got Yi Kyung beforehand, and it was Eon Hyuk, Jisoo, Sun Wook, and Jae Hyun who go to check the situation out. They run into the speedster monster, but it's sleep at the time, and they do end up retrieving Hyun, mainly because, well, we also need him. He's still useful to us. If we let him go and just stay here, then that's going to be a problem. But while they're rescuing him, the creature, that kind of the spiderish creature, ends up going into the main floor. I guess it was like finding its way this entire time. It's just been biding its time. Like maybe Hyun was meant to be bait, or maybe it's just a thing of it was like, you know what, now's the time, and ended up finding a way to break through and land in the main facility. The little girl's running from it, and Dusik is there to protect her, but like they're caught in a very unfortunate situation at the end there, where the creature's in the facility, it grabs the little girl, and that's where the episodes end. I was like, I mean, I don't think they'd kill a kid on camera, but you never know. That might be kind of an off-camera thing. We'll have to wait to see. Hopefully something happens to resolve that, especially because the other group is preoccupied at the time because they're dealing with the speed monster. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good